If all you gotta do is win a dunk contest to be called Superman, don't call me that no more. Hey, I'm just saying. Hey, we don't call you Superman anymore.
Shaq has been a lot of things in his life. Hall of Fame basketball player, rapper, actor, sheriff, product salesman, and of course, in-studio analyst. And throughout his many careers, he's always been proudly petty. When Shaq holds a grudge, it's not going anywhere. He'll mention you in interviews, talk smack about you in press conferences, and even diss you on stage. While Shaq has had beefs with dozens of players, he definitely dislikes some guys more than others. Here are 7 players Shaquille O'Neal hates the most, starting with his least favorite teammate of all time, Dennis Rodman. Shaquille O'Neal spent nearly every season of his prime as the centerpiece. In Orlando, he was the rising star everyone wanted to interview. In Los Angeles, he became the leader of a dynasty. At every stop, he expected to set the tone, establish routines, and take control of the locker room. He worked well with strong personalities, but only if they respected the structure. During the Lakers' title runs, Shaq became more vocal about the importance of professionalism. He credited teammates like Kobe Bryant and Dwyane Wade for their competitiveness and discipline, even when personal tensions existed behind the scenes. For him, a player's value came down to more than production. It included whether they showed up on time, followed the program, and stayed focused on the goal. That dynamic collapsed the moment Dennis Rodman joined the team. In a 2022 interview, when Shaq was asked to name his worst teammate, he didn't hesitate.
Worst teammate, Dennis Rodman.
He didn't elaborate with personal attacks or stories of locker room fights. He focused entirely on Rodman's refusal to follow basic team expectations. Rodman's habits were impossible to ignore. He skipped meetings, arrived late, and treated team routines like optional suggestions. Shaq recalled that players were expected to be at the arena an hour before tip-off, while Rodman strolled in just minutes before the game.
So we have to be there an hour before the game. He come in 50 minutes before.
Coaches would be mid-speech, trying to set a game plan, and Rodman would be in the shower, cooling off before the opening tip. Even with all that, Rodman could still deliver. In just 23 games with the Lakers, he averaged 11 rebounds while barely scoring. But for Shaq, that wasn't enough. The production never outweighed the disruption. Every time Rodman broke protocol or ignored team structure, it chipped away at the cohesion Shaq believed was essential to winning. That kind of teammate, in his eyes, couldn't be trusted. And once Shaq lost trust, there was no coming back from it. By 1999, Shaquille O'Neal was already a fixture in Los Angeles. He had the max contract, the commercials, the playoff expectations, and the attention of every media outlet in town. When Dennis Rodman arrived mid-season, the team dynamic immediately shifted. Rodman brought his own circus with him, and suddenly, Shaq wasn't the only spectacle in the building. Rodman pulled headlines without even touching the ball. Paparazzi followed him to games. Club owners offered VIP booths just to say he showed up. Shaq was used to commanding attention, but Rodman's presence kept disrupting the rhythm of a team trying to build chemistry. The biggest problem, in Shaq's eyes, was the support Rodman seemed to get from the front office. Like when you try to corral the guys together, Shaq said, and the people above you letting this one guy do whatever he wants? Rodman ignored meetings, showed up late, and disrupted routines without facing consequences. Shaq remembered him arriving 15 minutes before tip-off with a plate of chicken and rice, walking past teammates who were already locked in. While the rest of the team followed protocol, Rodman moved through the building like none of it applied. Shaq saw the problem clearly. Rodman wasn't being held to the same standard, and management didn't seem interested in changing that. After games, Rodman would leave the arena without showering, still soaked in sweat, and head straight to the club. He walked into packed venues as if he had just won a title, surrounded by women who looked like they were there for him alone. Shaq had spent years thinking he was the biggest star in the room, but that night made it clear that Rodman operated in a completely different orbit. Shaq kept talking about Dennis Rodman long after their time together ended. Whenever the subject came up, he told the same stories. There were mentions of missed meetings, last-minute arrivals, and nights out that blurred into game days. Here's how he described Rodman going to the club.
He smelled like garbage truck water.
However, that didn't prevent Rodman from womanizing and being the best at it out of all of the Lakers in the club.
And he got models on him at the club.
But all of this didn't start overnight. The tension between Shaq and Worm didn't start in Los Angeles. Back when O'Neal was in Orlando and Rodman was with the Bulls, the two clashed regularly. Rodman made it a point to get under his skin, throwing cheap shots, flopping on contact, and jawing at every dead ball. Their playoff matchups turned into a running battle. At one point, Rodman held Shaq scoreless for an entire half. Commentators paused the broadcast to highlight his defense and the way he fought for position without giving up ground. Rodman later confirmed that his short run in LA was marked by constant friction. He said the locker room had no patience for him and that Shaq and Kobe spent most of their time bitching about everything. Midway through the 1999 lockout season, Rodman left the team and went to Las Vegas, claiming he needed space from the tension. By the time he returned, the relationship was already beyond repair, and he was soon released. The next big man we have on the list didn't play with Shaq, but he still ended up having one of the biggest public beefs with him. That big man is JaVale McGee. Shaqtin' a Fool started in 2011 as a regular segment on Inside the NBA. It was marketed as a lighthearted look at the worst plays from around the league, but it didn't take long for Shaq to turn it into something else.
Oh, post him up, JaVale. Post him up.
JaVale McGee became the centerpiece of the segment, featured week after week for the kinds of mistakes that other players usually got away with. Bad passes, missed dunks, mental lapses.
Where the hell are you going?
Some lowlights were funny and were pretty much fair targets. However, others clearly weren't. Shaq introduced McGee's clips with an extremely mocking tone that became a running gag.
JaVale McGee.
The crowd laughed, the panel laughed, and Shaq kept piling it on. McGee was given nicknames like Tragic Bronson. He was named Shaqtin' MVP multiple times, even in seasons where he barely played or was sidelined with injury. No one else came close to being featured as often. Eventually, the pushback started. Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley questioned why McGee was still being singled out. They pointed out that some clips weren't bloopers at all, but Shaq didn't back off. He kept using McGee as the face of the show, sometimes 3 or 4 clips in a row. McGee tried to play along. In a 2013 appearance, he said, "No press is bad press." Then, he slipped in a verbal gut punch.
I don't watch Shaq the Fool.
By the time JaVale McGee reached the Warriors, the damage was already done. He later said the show had slowly chipped away at his career. Coaches told him they had judged him based on Shaqtin', not his actual play. The clips turned into a reputation, and that reputation followed him. On Club Shay Shay, McGee said some staff were surprised to learn he was a smart kid, because the show had shaped their opinion before they'd even spoken to him. Shaq didn't stop. Even when McGee played just 5 games after fracturing his tibia, he still ended up on the segment. That year, Shaq gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award for being Shaqtin's most reliable star. Eventually, McGee pushed back. At 4 in the morning, he tweeted that Shaq was obsessed with him. Shaq fired back with insults, threats, and a photoshopped image mocking McGee's face. Then he aired a fake Doctor Strange trailer made entirely from McGee's worst plays. Steve Kerr and Kevin Durant both went public. Kerr said the narrative about McGee was false and pointed directly to Shaqtin' a Fool. Warriors executives contacted Turner Sports and asked Shaq to leave it alone. The story had escalated so far that both players' mothers got involved, defending their sons in the press. Shaq backed off, but only because "my mama said so." He never apologized. After the feud boiled over, McGee focused on rebuilding his career. He joined the Warriors in 2016 and carved out a role as a dependable bench piece. No chaos, no distractions. He played controlled minutes in a system that valued discipline and consistency. Golden State won the title that year, and McGee became a 2-time champion the following season. He added a 3rd ring in 2020 with the Lakers. Then came Olympic gold in 2021. In 5 years, McGee went from a running joke to one of the most decorated journeymen in the league. But the show never fully disappeared. Fans kept bringing it up. Reporters asked about it in interviews. McGee didn't hold back. He said to a reporter, "Fans think it's real. They think I'm a dumb person." McGee also added, "It's disappointing that grown men are trying to ruin someone's career." Shaq never featured him on the popular segment again.
JaVale McGee has kind of reinvented his career.
Shaq, along with the rest of the crew, praised JaVale's career reinvention.
He's playing great. I'm happy for him. I'm proud of him.
McGee retired from the league in 2025 with not a lot of fanfare. 15 years in the league, 3 rings, 1 gold medal, and 1 long-running segment that followed him everywhere. Once he was gone, Shaq's attention turned to a new target. This time, it was the person that occupies the next spot on the list, and that's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant joined the Warriors in 2016, less than 2 months after losing to them in the Western Conference Finals. Golden State had just gone 73-9 and were already the most dominant team in the league. Adding Durant gave them an overwhelming advantage and reshaped the competitive landscape overnight. The decision triggered immediate backlash. Fans burned jerseys. Players questioned his mindset. Analysts called him insecure and accused him of ducking responsibility. The narrative followed him to every arena. Durant kept his focus on the court, but the noise never stopped. Shaq joined in too. He had never been shy about criticizing stars who teamed up to win titles, and Durant gave him a clear target. Shaq said at one point, "I didn't go join the team that beat me." That quote followed Durant for years. Shaq kept referencing the gap between different kinds of championships. He never said Durant's rings didn't count, but he made sure people questioned how they were earned. The first signs of actual trouble with Durant actually came when Shaq was beefing with JaVale McGee. Durant openly criticized Shaq for how much he made fun of JaVale, for trying to bully him, and for threatening him with physical violence when JaVale fired back.
I ain't no cops could threaten civilians like that.
He questioned Shaq's maturity as well, calling his behavior childish.
It's definitely childish.
He finished things off by saying that Shaq could have easily been on Shaqtin' a Fool with some of his lowlights back in the day while he was playing.
He's a shitty free throw shooter. He missed dunks. He airball free throws.
Durant argued that Shaq's constant mockery had professional consequences. He said the show was hurting McGee's reputation and costing him money. He also called out retired players who take shots at the current generation, accusing them of stirring up feuds just to stay relevant. Shaq responded with a tweet telling Durant to stay out of it. Then, in an interview with Sports Illustrated, he dismissed the criticism altogether. He said Durant didn't have the right to question him and compared him to players who had never broken through. According to Shaq, Durant was still outside the circle that defined true dominance. Shaq continued making digs by comparing Durant to other stars. He said LeBron James had earned respect for the way he won championships and claimed Durant hadn't done enough to be mentioned the same way. When asked about Durant's past criticisms, Shaq brushed most of it off. He acknowledged that some of the points were true, especially the part about overpowering opponents. But instead of backing down, he used it to reinforce his own image. The rest, he dismissed. He shifted the conversation to the league as a whole. Shaq said the newer generation of players didn't handle criticism well. He included Durant in that group and pointed to his own experience with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as a contrast. He said he didn't argue with legends. He listened and moved on. Durant brought the feud back years later with a comment on Twitter questioning Shaq's understanding of the game. Shaq responded by mocking Durant's appearance and followed it up on his podcast. He said he jokes around, but he's not hard to find if someone wants to start something. Nothing was settled. They stopped naming each other directly, but the back and forth never stopped. Even before the dust managed to settle with Durant, Shaq found himself revisiting old history. The next name he brought up was someone from his own era, Scottie Pippen. Shaq and Scottie Pippen had been circling each other since the 90s. They faced off in both conferences and built a steady record of competitive tension long before any public feud. In 1999, after the Bulls dynasty broke up, Pippen joined the Trailblazers instead of the Lakers. When asked why, he said he felt Portland was closer to winning a title. The two met again in the 2000 Western Conference Finals. Portland led by 15 in the fourth quarter of Game 7 but collapsed late. The series ended with a lob to Shaq, one of the most replayed moments of his career. Years later, during a separate argument, Shaq posted that clip on social media with a caption aimed squarely at Pippen. He implied that the loss proved what most already believed, that Pippen couldn't win without Jordan. The history between their teams stayed close for years, and the playoff battles only deepened the rivalry. It gave Shaq material to work with once their tension moved from the court to the media. The back and forth resurfaced in 2015 when Shaq posted a hypothetical matchup between all-time Lakers and all-time Bulls. He said the Lakers would win by 50. His lineup featured Magic, Kobe, Elgin Baylor, Kareem, and himself. The post blew up fast, but it didn't take long for Pippen to jump in. Pippen fired back by pointing to Chicago's 6 championships and questioned whether Shaq ever led a team without help. He posted images of Shaq playing alongside other stars and accused him of being a passenger in Miami, Phoenix, and Cleveland. He wrapped it with a jab about Shaq's free throw shooting and said he should focus less on trash talk. Shaq responded outside a club, telling TMZ that Pippen was good but never good enough. He said Harper and Kerr deserved more credit than Pippen got and made it clear he didn't see Scottie as a top option on those Bulls team. Of course, people wanted to know what was going on, so Shaq took an opportunity to go on the Dan Patrick Show to air things out.
Scottie Pippen can't disrespect me.
He insisted that the comments were nothing personal and that he wasn't even interested in Scottie's thoughts on the matter at all.
I didn't say, hey, at Scottie Pippen, we'll beat you guys by 50.
But while he didn't make the first move, Shaq, in his own style, promised that he will be the one with the last laugh.
He swung first, so I'm going to swing second, and I'm going to swing last.
On his podcast, Shaq invited Pippen to settle it on air. When that didn't happen, Shaq pitched a 2-on-2 game, himself and his son Sharif against Pippen and Scottie Jr., with 660, 0 on the line. Pippen didn't respond, but the post stayed up. Shaq made sure it was seen. When Pippen started criticizing Jordan publicly in 2021, the fallout spread fast. He questioned Jordan's leadership, dismissed the GOAT debate altogether, and called Magic Johnson the best player of all time. In his book Unguarded, he said he was a better teammate than Jordan ever was. That shift gave Shaq another opening. On the big podcast, Shaq didn't hold back. He said if Pippen ever made those comments to his face, he'd hit him in the throat. The clip went viral, and media outlets framed it as another throwaway moment in the old Lakers versus Bulls debate. Shaq disagreed. He said Pippen had made it personal years ago and was still trying to rewrite history to elevate himself. For Shaq, the feud had little to do with rosters or matchups. It was about roles, reputations, and revisionism. And once Pippen brought Jordan into it, Shaq wasn't going to let it slide. You know what else Shaq doesn't let go? Players with big contracts who don't show up when it counts. Just ask Ben Simmons, the next guy on our list. Shaquille O'Neal was one of Ben Simmons' earliest and loudest supporters. The LSU connection played a big role. From the moment Simmons arrived in Baton Rouge, Shaq referred to him as the chosen one and treated him like the next great product of their shared alma mater. Throughout the 2015-2016 college season, Shaq went out of his way to defend Simmons' reputation. Even when LSU underperformed and missed the NCAA tournament, he placed the blame on the coaching staff and lack of roster depth, not Simmons. He called him the best player in the country and said it without hesitation. When Philadelphia drafted Simmons first overall, Shaq backed the move immediately. He said the Sixers had landed a franchise cornerstone and predicted Simmons would dominate with his size, passing, and basketball IQ. Even after Simmons missed his entire rookie season, Shaq kept the faith. He compared his vision to Magic Johnson's and said it was only a matter of time before Simmons took over the league. By the 2020 and 2021 playoffs, Simmons' weaknesses were no longer a quiet concern. His reluctance to shoot and limited scoring range became a national talking point. At first, Shaq stayed patient. He reminded viewers that Simmons was still young and said the criticism was premature. That changed after Game 7 against the Hawks. With the season on the line, Simmons passed up an open dunk. The play went viral. Shaq didn't hold back. He said if Simmons had done that in his locker room, there would have been a physical confrontation. On Inside the NBA, he called Simmons scared to shoot and said he was letting the team down. On his podcast, Shaq doubled down, telling Ben that his biggest problem was social media. He was soaking up all of the praise from the internet, thinking he's better than he actually was.
You got these people telling you how good you are. You ain't that good, man.
Simmons reached out privately. He wanted to know why Shaq had turned on it.
Wait, Ben Simmons
No.
DM'd you after he heard what you said last week.
Shaq addressed it on air and said he told Simmons exactly what he felt. The issue wasn't talent, it was effort. He said Simmons wasn't putting in the work and kept looking for excuses. However, even at this point, it was clear Shaq was on Ben's side.
He's probably mad because I'm his LSU brother, and I am.
By the time Simmons sat out the entire 2021-2022 season during his standoff with the Sixers, Shaq's support had completely disappeared. He said Simmons wasn't injured but scared to face the pressure. That was the breaking point for Shaq, who had spent years defending him. Now, he said there was no excuse left. After the trade to Brooklyn, things didn't improve. Simmons struggled to stay on the court and showed little growth when he did play. Shaq called him a liability and said he had become one of the least effective players in the league. At one point, he said Simmons was flat out stealing money and not living up to the expectations that came with his contract. He went further by saying Simmons never worked on his weaknesses and didn't seem to care about competing. In later interviews, Shaq said he was personally disappointed. He had been all in on Simmons from the start and believed he had the tools to dominate. But over time, he saw no hunger, no toughness, and no desire to improve. According to Shaq, Simmons had the talent but lacked the competitive edge. And that's something you either have or you don't. Shaq doesn't just go after stars who disappear in big moments. He saves special criticism for players who get paid like superstars but never play like it. Rudy Gobert made that list the moment he signed a $200 million contract. In 2019, Rudy Gobert broke down in tears during a press conference after missing out on an All-Star selection. Shaq didn't hold back, mocking the moment on social media and said there's no place for crying in basketball. He told Gobert to toughen up and even joked about sending him icy hot for his face. Not long after, Kenny Smith praised Gobert on Inside the NBA, calling him one of the best big men in the league. Shaq immediately pushed back, cutting him off and saying Gobert didn't belong in that conversation. He doubled down on other platforms too. On Inside the NBA, Barkley teased Shaq that he couldn't play in today's game because all centers shoot threes. He even went on to say that Gobert would shut down Shaq. While it was a clear joke, in typical Shaq style, he got a little bit defensive.
Rudy Gobert dominate you. Chuck, say one thing, I'm gonna punch you right in your face.
Too defensive for someone who truly didn't care. And Shaq did care. He just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Then he turned back to Gobert's contract. He said Gobert was solid, played hard, defended well, but none of it justified a $200 million deal. He challenged Gobert to prove himself by locking up Nikola Jokic.
You want to impress me? Hold Joker under 15 points.
O'Neal also criticized Rudy's physicality, saying big men should play with force and stop letting smaller players dunk on them. Shaq kept circling back to Rudy Gobert's contract. He mockingly said that this should as an inspiration to all of the children out there trying to make it as basketball players.
If you average 11 points in the NBA, you can get 200 million.
He joked that if he played in today's era, he'd be putting up Rudy Goldberg numbers and claimed he'd be worth $300 million. Gobert eventually responded in an interview. He said there was no real beef and made it clear he wasn't going to trade insults. He said if people wanted to discredit his career, that was their choice, and it said more about them than it did about him. Not long after, he posted a tweet that many took as a shot at Shaq, hinting that the criticism came from jealousy over money and attention.
And he asked you, who's the worst NBA player of all time? You said Rudy Gobert.
Gobert responded again on Twitter, suggesting Shaq was jealous of his contract and the money he earned in his career.
You don't need that stuff to stay relevant.
Shaq didn't let it go. He liked a tweet that compared Gobert to Bismack Biyombo and made it clear that he didn't think Gobert belonged among elite centers. On his podcast, he said Gobert was being overpaid and called himself the president of the Big Man Alliance. He said that if you want to be paid like a franchise big, you need to dominate like one. When asked if Gobert deserved a spot in the Hall of Fame, Shaq said no. He even threatened to show up in a dress if it ever happened. Shaq finally gave Gobert a small bit of credit after a dominant game against the Lakers. Gobert had 27 points and 24 rebounds, and Shaq admitted he was impressed. He said Gobert was dominating and added that he was happy for him. But the praise didn't mean the rivalry was over. Gobert fired back not long after, reacting to Shaq's old claim that he'd only score 12 points on him. He said he would lock Shaq up and made it clear he'd welcome the matchup. Shaq responded with another jab, joking that he was curious what French barbecue chicken would taste like. Gobert didn't back off. In an interview with Taylor Rooks, he said again that he believed he could defend Shaq and that facing him in his prime would be a challenge he'd look forward to. Shaq acknowledged the comment. He said he respected the confidence and that his criticism was always about pushing players, not shooting them down. Richard Jefferson added fuel to the fire by saying Gobert is almost guaranteed to make the Hall of Fame. Then he took a shot at Shaq, reminding everyone of the bet and saying he couldn't wait to see him show up in a dress. And speaking of, the player Shaq definitely hates the most is Dwight Howard. No surprises there. Shaquille O'Neal had claimed the Superman nickname early in his career, pointing to his tattoo and dominant play in the paint as the reason it fit. When Dwight Howard wore a cape during the 2008 Slam Dunk Contest and soared to victory, fans ran with it. Overnight, Howard became the new Superman, and Shaq wasn't having it.
Superman is in the building.
He immediately criticized the move, saying Howard didn't dominate the way he had and had no business using the name. In interviews, Shaq accused him of copying both his brand and identity.
If all you gotta do is win a dunk contest to be called Superman, don't call me that no more.
The media picked up the story and fueled comparisons between the two, especially their time in Orlando. Shaq dismissed all of it. He said Howard didn't intimidate anyone and had racked up awards in a softer league. He even questioned Howard's Defensive Player of the Year trophies, saying blocking shots isn't the same as dominating a game. Howard stayed mostly quiet, letting others defend him. Shaq escalated the feud by posting stat graphics on Twitter and Instagram, lining up his numbers against Dwight Howard's. He pointed to scoring, rebounding, and trips to the finals, emphasizing the gap in dominance. O'Neal made it clear he saw a difference in how each player carried a franchise. He said he led his team to the finals in his 4th year and took a shot at Howard for needing more help to get there. Howard responded through interviews. He said he wasn't trying to chase anyone else's legacy. His goal was to focus on his own growth and be the best version of himself. Shaq didn't ease things up.
It's only one Superman to ever come to this league, and you know his name.
On Inside the NBA, he criticized Howard's early playoff exits and said a player getting knocked out in the first round couldn't claim the Superman title.
You need to let that Superman hatred go. I ain't got nothing to do with it.
He also mocked Howard's postgame, saying his offensive playbook could fit on a napkin. Howard addressed it again in a Sports Illustrated feature, saying he respected former players but didn't understand why so many of them took shots instead of offering support. Shaq responded on his podcast. He said respect came from production, not personality. Titles and dominance mattered more than branding. Fans were divided. Some said Howard had been targeted unfairly. Others agreed with Shaq. After leaving Orlando, Dwight Howard's role steadily changed. He bounced between teams and eventually settled into life as a journeyman big man. Gone were the days of post touches and pick-and-roll dunks. By the time he joined the Lakers again in 2019, he was a bench piece, defending, rebounding, and setting screens for ball handlers. When the Lakers won the 2020 title in the bubble, Howard finally earned a ring, but Shaq dismissed his contributions. He said the finals belonged to Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Howard didn't move the needle. When Howard was left off the NBA's 75th anniversary team, Shaq celebrated on his podcast. He told listeners there was no case for Howard and joked that he wouldn't even put him in the top 200. Things got more pointed in 2022 when Howard signed with a team in Taiwan's Tone League. Shaq mocked the move and reposted memes comparing Howard's overseas highlights to high school film. He called it the natural outcome of not measuring up when it counted. Howard posted on Instagram saying he was still Superman and telling critics to stay blessed. Shaq responded with laughing emojis and captions like "Superman where?" He never let it go.
Just angry for no reason.
In 2024, Howard hinted at an NBA comeback that never materialized. Even in retirement, he defended his resume online. Shaq eventually downplayed the whole thing in an interview. He called Howard a good guy and said he just liked pushing buttons. It was never personal, at least according to him. Dwight echoed the similar sentiments in follow-up interviews, saying he respected Shaq and didn't hold anything against him.
You think you and Shaq will ever be friends?
Yes.
By the time Howard retired in 2025 after an 18-year career with 8 All-Star selections, 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and 1 NBA title, both men had publicly acknowledged mutual respect, effectively ending their long-running beef. Shaq has clowned a lot of players, but these 7 got the worst of it. Whether it was about money, effort, or just petty pride, he never held back. Who do you think deserved it? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more